Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I want to show you guys the light rays effect in DaVinci Resolve 16 and a few ways that you can add it to your video in order to get some interesting lighting results without having too much effort on your part. So you'll be able to find the light rays effect if you go over to the effects library and OpenFX. Light rays is listed in here. So you can attach it to any video clip in your timeline. And if we apply it in this way, what will happen is that anything that is above a certain threshold, which has a bright spot on the screen, usually if you're talking about a night scene, that would be buildings emitting light, then it will take those bright spots and output light rays in a certain direction. So once we've added on the OpenFX to the clip, I can go over to the OpenFX tab on the inspector, and we can see that we have a bunch of settings to play around with here. So the first important setting would be the source threshold. So depending on how bright areas are on the screen, they're going to be above or below a certain threshold. If it is above the threshold in terms of brightness, then it is going to emit the light rays. So if I want to have more of the clip actually emitting light rays, then one way I can control that is to lower this setting down. So if I drag this down to a very low source threshold, you can see that even the buildings that have relatively dark red lights will now start emitting light rays. And if I drag this back up, then only the brightest of the buildings will actually emit any of these extra light rays. Of course, note that if I turn off the light rays, you can see that in this scene, many of the buildings kind of already have some light rays to begin with. So don't be confused with what we're adding on top of that to what was in the original shot. Next up, for the position, you can choose where the light rays should be emitting from. In this case, the XY position is talking about a ratio across the screen. So X position of 0.5 means halfway in the center of the screen, X-wise, and a Y position of 1.2 means that it is coming from above the screen. In terms of pixels, this would be an extra 20% of the total height from top to bottom, and the actual source position would be somewhere up here. But we can control this direction. So for instance, if I wanted all of the light rays to start from the center and then come out in all directions, then I can take the Y position and set that to 0.5. And now you see that the ones that are above that center position in the clip, the ones that are above it will actually angle their light rays up to the right, up straight up, and the ones that are below that center point are still aiming their direction down. And I can drag on this value, and you can see how that actually adjusts it. Now you can note that these are actually animatable over time. So if I wanted to have a little fun here, I could actually set a keyframe for this position, and then choose another point in the video, and actually lower the Y position down to maybe somewhere below the actual video, 20% below it. And now if I play it back, those light rays are going to kind of be going wild in their direction, as you can see there. So that's one cool trick that you can do with that. It might make even more sense if you had a moving shot and you wanted the direction of the rays to move with the shot as the camera changed position. So as an alternative to having the rays emit from a direction, you can actually have all of the rays emit at a certain angle. So if I reset these values back to their default, and under the ray directions category, we go from a location to at an angle. You'll notice that now all of these rays are aiming in the same angle. So I can drag this around, and you can see that the light rays can go in whatever direction I want them to. The main difference here is that every single light ray will be emitting in the same direction regardless of its position. So using at an angle can be helpful if you need all of the light rays to go at the same direction. Then under the appearance, we can control the size and shape of the light rays that are being emitted. So we might decide that these light rays aren't long enough, so we could increase the length, and this will increase all of the light rays, so we can get quite exaggerated with this. If we decide that we see these light rays and they're too obvious there, we could increase the softness to have them blur out a little bit, which will kind of disperse the light in a wider range of area, but making it less obvious that those light rays are in fact a ray. However, if we go the opposite direction and make it a softness of 0, then these become more or less just straight lines of brightness. Now, if this is not visible enough for us, then we can increase the brightness as well. Of course, the brightness of each ray will depend on the original color that it is emitting from. So it's always going to be corresponding with the original area where the light's coming. If we think that some of our light rays aren't quite visible enough, we can pump up the brightness on all of the light rays. So the light rays will brighten, but this of course corresponds with how much But this corresponds with the original light source, so if it was really tiny and kind of dark, it's still going to be dark relative to the brighter areas where the light rays are emitting from. And we can also manipulate the color of the light rays a bit, so if we wanted to have all of the rays shift towards a certain hue of color, it wouldn't be too hard to adjust that here by picking a color. So when you use the light rays on an entire base clip, then that's obviously going to be emitting light from anything above the source threshold. But you may decide that you want to add an extra object on top of your video clip, and you want that object to emit some light as well, such as artificially inserting a moon, by having the moon actually have some moonlight to make it at least a little bit more realistic. So what we could do is add a PNG image on top of our base video clip, such as this image of a moon, scale it down, and position it where we might want a moon in the video. And now what we could do is add on the light rays to this moon clip, just like before. You'll notice though that if this is a top clip, even if it's a PNG, that this actually becomes a full image clip now. So you're going to want to change the composite mode from normal to something like add instead, so that the black areas that have no light are still going to let everything else show through, so that the bottom clip can still be in the final composition. However, if we only use one clip for both the moon and the light rays effect, and we try to change something like the opacity on the moon, then what you'll see is that by lowering the opacity, it actually lowers it on the entire video clip. So if you want to customize the visibility of your moon and the light rays independently of each other, what you could do is duplicate your moon clip one more time. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V to copy and paste it, and put it right above. And then now, if we go to OpenFX, there's a select output drop down here. So rather than final image, we can do light rays alone, which will actually hide the moon as its light source. And then we take the bottom clip and we remove the light rays effect from that altogether. So by doing this, we have a copy of the moon which is emitting the light rays. But if we try to hide the bottom moon, then you can see that the top moon is completely invisible except for the light rays, because we set it to the light rays alone mode. So now we can independently control our moon that we actually want to be visible and the light rays moon. So at this point, we might decide, you know what, the original moon is too visible. So we might decide that the original moon is too visible, so we could lower some of the opacity on that, make it a little bit see-through. We could change the composite mode. So something like hard light might be interesting, making those dark areas of the moon almost entirely impossible to see, while still showing the bright areas. And now we can reshow the light rays moon and start playing around with that. So we might want to control the direction there. In this case, I think it would be simpler to choose ray directions at an angle, because then it's really easy to understand. We don't have to worry about what point it's emitting from, just what angle we want the light rays of the moon to show at. And then we could lengthen these light rays a bunch, soften them out so that they're not so obvious, and we can brighten it as well so that we get some moonlight shining on our scene. The only thing you'll have to keep in mind is that if you want to adjust the position of the moon, you'll want to adjust both of these moons, so you can actually control both of their positions at the same time if you do a control left click to select both positions. And now we can move the light rays and the moon at the same time. Okay, so one more thing I want to talk about with light rays in DaVinci Resolve 16 is that you can actually use them on the color tab as well. So if you want a bit more control over, say, what regions of the screen will qualify for emitting light rays, then you can actually take away your light rays effect from the Edit tab, and we can move it over to the Color tab. So we can add light rays to a corrector node. So taking this original video clip from video track 1, you can add in a OpenFX such as the light rays effect to any corrector node that you have set up in the Color tab of DaVinci Resolve 16. So for instance, I can add in light rays here, just like we did before. But on the Color tab, you have access to extra functions, such as having power windows. So if I wanted to mask part of this screen away, maybe we don't want to add extra light rays to all of these fireworks that are coming from over there. Maybe we only want these buildings to emit light rays. So I could say cut off part of the bottom of the screen by using a power window. Using the curve tool over here, I can easily draw the area which I want to emit light rays from, and then just close the loop by continuing with the pen tool. And now to make it really obvious, I'll increase the brightness. So you can see that as I increase the brightness, that the only areas which are getting these extra light rays that did not exist in the original clip are those that are in my selector region now. So imagine that you had a moving object somewhere in the screen, and that was the only thing you wanted to add light rays to, even though there were several bright objects in the screen. This would be really useful. And if you needed to track that object across the screen with the power tool, making sure that the light rays were always in that area, wherever that object is moving across the screen, you can use the power tool and track that object's movement in conjunction with the power window. Another way that we could do this would be to use the qualifier tool to select a certain color range, which will be allowed to emit light rays. So for instance, I could temporarily turn off the light rays clip, and maybe I only want, like, let's say the oranges to emit light rays, not the whites, which are already bright. So I can increase this width as well to make it select a little bit more of our video. And you can see whatever you have qualified will show up here in this corrector node. And then I can add in the light rays, and you can see that now only a few areas are actually getting the extra light rays as well. So using the color tab qualifier like this would be a little bit more of an advanced way, rather than just having a source brightness threshold like you would on the color tab. Of course, luminance is basically the same as the source brightness threshold, but you can see that the qualifier tool on the color tab also allows you to choose saturation, basically how vivid the colors are, and the hue range, which colors themselves should qualify for the final effect. And since on the color tab you can break your original corrector node into multiple segments before you recombine them at the end, one thing you could do would be, let's say, add in a splitter node to break your video into red, green, and blue. So I add in 3 more corrector nodes here. So 1 for red, 1 for green, and 1 for blue. And then you can add your effect on any one of them. So maybe you only want the light rays effect to take part on the red channel. So we can drag it onto there and leave it separated from the green and blue channels. And then we can recombine them with a combiner node. So right click, add node. So red to red, green to green, and blue to blue for our final video output. And now you can see, kind of interestingly, that the light rays is now only taking from the red in the video, and that the light rays that get output are red themselves, because we're only looking at reds on this red corrector node. So that's interesting as well. Didn't really know how that one would turn out. So as you can see, using the color tab, you have more control over how you want to apply an OpenFX to your video clips, because you can break things into nodes. You have power windows and qualifiers and all those kind of cool tools. So in this video, I've shown you guys 3 ways that you can take the light rays OpenFX and apply it to your video clips in DaVinci Resolve 16. So I hope you guys got something out of this. I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my future video content.